Hello everyone, my name is Luke Whitehead and welcome back to the Coach David and Monolith YouTube channel. Another fortnight has passed, which means there is another iteration of the Logitech McLaren G challenge. So we had Monza last time, now we have the Fuji Speedway, which is my personal favourite circuit, so I'm very excited for these next 2 weeks. So without further ado, let's get into these lap guides and figure out what you need to do to get the most out of the car at this track. Let's get into it. So, first things first, like we always do in these videos, we're going to start in the setup screen. Now, we've just applied the safe setup, or the default setup, I should say, for the McLaren. And I wanted to go through and let you know the things that we're going to start with for these runs. And, we're obviously going to adjust if we need to. But, of course, for the first thing, we're going to look at the virtual energy. Now, I have heard a couple of people mention that the fuel ratio is incorrect for this car. We'd, of course, see that as we do the run. We can check on the UI, which I will also show during the laps. But for the race, it's 12 laps absolute maximum, because obviously it's a 20-minute race, 1 minute 40 average lap at absolute max. So it is going to be 12 laps. We're going to go 40% because we should have plenty of energy to do those 12 laps. If we need to reduce it or increase it a little bit, we can do that now. We can do that after our run, but that's just a good starting point. For traction control, I found that anything around 444, 432, 430. We're going to run 430, but anything around that margin kind of works. We usually run 443 for most tracks, but obviously with Fuji, the car does tend to understeer quite a bit, and especially with the low speed corners where the car really does struggle on fixed setup, you do want to kind of get the car sliding a little bit at low speed. Particularly on power, you want to try and get a little bit of a slide, and that's better done with TC slip angle being lower. So again, it is ultimate preference, but we're going to start on 430 today and see if we can change it, or if we need to change it after we've done our first couple of runs. For the wheels and brakes, we're going to set the brake bias all the way down. We usually run around 44.5, and we're going to start with that today, as well as ABS 6, because the car generally understeers quite a lot at low speed, particularly in the trailing phase, and the rearwards brake bias and the lower ABS with 6 rather than the usual 9 will help quite a lot with that. I did find that ABS 9 was slightly better in turn 2, so that fast left-hander, as well as the last corner. But again, I think on the balance of things, 6 ABS is slightly better for me personally, but by all means experiment with ABS 6 and ABS 9 as well. Max pedal force, we are going to reduce it to 107 kilograms or kgf, solely because I feel like it's slightly nicer under braking. It allows for slightly more trailing, and particularly into that chicane, the bus-stop chicane, which we will come to in a second. I just find it slightly better for me, but again, anywhere between sort of 95% to 100%, depending on your preferences, can work perfectly fine. So let's just go over those final things so you guys can see what we're starting with, and again, we'll change that on the fly if we need to. We have the ability to do that with our button mappings, and you can also do it in the UI as well if you have UI button mappings. So let's get into the first run. So the first thing we're going to do, like we always do, is go through the general reference points of this lap. So first things first, we're going to go to turn 1. We're going to cross over the pit line. Hopefully it doesn't invalidate our next lap. We're going to brake before the 100-meter board. I generally find that this sort of speaker megaphone on the left-hand side is quite a good reference, which you can just see there. But generally just like 120 or so meters as a guesstimate is a pretty good reference to braking. Down to gear 1 for turn 1. You want to try and hook this curb. You can hook the wheel on the green, or you can just take the red and white. Either way, your priority is to try and avoid the exit curb and take a short exit line, keeping the car as far to the right hand side as you can. And now, coming into turn 2, you want to brake just past this barrier on the left hand side, or midway between the brake markers of the 100 and the 50, it's around 75 meters. I'm going to take the inside curb as well, take the green, but make sure you don't take any of the grass on the inside because you will have a big bounce. And then through this long right-hander, you want to try and take a little bit of the grey on the right-hand side because it does help to hook you round, especially because the car is very, very front limited through here. Usually take a downshift, so as you enter in 4th, take a downshift down to 3rd, get back on the power, try and hook as much of this curb material on the right-hand side as you can, because you want to try and keep the car as far to the right-hand side as is possible. Brake just after the 50, or midway between the 50 and the Michelin board that you see above me. Gear 2 or Gear 1 through here. Take the inside curb. Again, be careful not to take too much because you can really stunt your momentum through there if you do take too much. and you can also take a bad bounce, which can make the car understeer quite a bit. And then you want to keep the car as far to the right hand side as you can, down towards what is one of the most annoying corners on the entire circuit. You're going to brake just at that tarmac road on the right hand side, so this one here. You want to use that roughly as a brake marker, brake along the curb, and then at the very last minute you want to try and point the car up, follow the sort of rubber lines, hit the inside curb, take as much as you can because it can rotate the car, and then you want to try and short shift up through here on the second for better traction. Let the car run out. Be careful with that track limit though, it can be quite harsh. Then to here, you want to brake. Honestly, it's quite a bit of intuition. You kind of need to find what works for you in this section because there's no concrete markers. Generally, after this curve on the left works quite well. We'll also go through in more detail so I can see when we're braking, because again, it is very difficult to actually point out markers in this final sector. For the final corner though, we have quite a nice one. You can see that orange barrier on the right hand side here. We generally use that as a braking reference. As soon as it goes off screen, that is when you slam the brakes. You want to go middle of the circuit there, and then hit the apex, get back on the throttle nice and early. So let's see how that all looks when we're attacking at full pace. It's going to take probably a lap or two to get up to temperature again. Obviously we have tyre warmers on for these daily races, but on that lap obviously we have quite cold, well, we went around quite slowly, which means our tyres are quite cold. So let's just see what sort of lap time we can start with and build from there on this first run. I think the main thing as well that you need to remember with this particular daily race, that probably didn't apply as much for the likes of Fuji or Le Mans in the previous weeks, but the tyre wear is very, very brutal, which does mean that you only get a very limited number of laps to actually put in a quick lap time for the leaderboard. So that does mean that you have to really focus up on keeping the tyres in check for as long as possible. But even then, you only really get 3 or 4 laps, I think, of full push running before the tyres kind of reach their peak and start declining. So it is definitely a unique challenge that we haven't really had in the last couple of weeks of this competition. We can also see that the fuel ratio is a little bit high, probably about a lap and a half over. So we will double check what fuel ratio we need in the HUD. Do you think we could perhaps raise the TC slip angle a little bit? I'm going to try 4-3-1 and just see how that feels. I do definitely think that running 4-3-1 is better than 4-3-0 though. So perhaps if you're a little bit less confident with the car, you could use 4-3-2, sorry, or 4-3-3. I do think the lower TC cut does help quite a lot here though, especially because you're using a lot of exit curbs, so having slightly less TC cutting in, so there's TC interference, particularly on the curbs, can be quite helpful. But the fastest lap on the leaderboard is a 40.823, and we've done a 40.741, so that's not a bad start. Let's see if we can go a little bit quicker. I would hope if I didn't outbrake myself. But it's definitely something I am finding, or did find as well, a lot with the other Logitech McLaren G challenge tracks that we've done, is that the braking does feel very inconsistent in the McLaren. It does seem like you can do something slightly wrong, brake even a meter too late, and you miss the apex by a lot more significantly than you would expect. I think generally what we did find at Monza last week, if you watched that video, is that we did a lot of engine braking and short shifting. So we'd go down to gear 1, short shift up to second. It doesn't seem like we need as much of that at Fuji because the braking zones are quite a bit longer. The corners are quite long rather than being quite abrupt like they are at Monza. Oh, a bit too much curb there, I think. Still got a nice exit though, so I'm a little bit surprised about that. We're on 4.6, let's see if we can close it out. Good final corner though. Not a great exit either though. I don't even think we're going to improve. We'll try and do one more lap, see if we can do it again. Our tyres are a little bit on the warm side though, so we might kind of be a bit in the mud now. We did improve by 6 thousandths, but mostly carried by sector 1 being better somehow. Yeah, it just seems to be gaining on exits on this lap. Okay, let's try and get the chicane right. We got it quite badly on the previous lap. Again, a bit deep. Oh, that's been valid, isn't it? No, it's not. Okay. We're getting to the 0.6s though. So that's nice. With a surprisingly strong final sector. Nice. Not a bad start. And then if we look in the UI, see 0.81 we need for the fuel ratio. We're doing 3.1% a lap, so we can double check all of that stuff. But let's have a look at that lap now and see how we got on, see what we did right, and see what we can improve. Okay, now let's have a look at that 140.6 that we just did. Let's see where we could improve, where we went well, where we didn't go so well, and just also figure out where the references are and how that looks on a full push lap. We'll also look at Coach Dave Delta afterwards to look at some brake traces before going on a second run. So, coming down towards turn 1, you see I generally use this little sort of curve in the road that you can see here, and the curb as kind of a reference point, kind of breaking midway between those two, at least on the fixed setup in the McLaren. You could also say that looking at the brake inputs, we kind of brake as that megaphone or that speaker kind of goes out of view, as you can see just before the 100-meter board. It's kind of, as I mentioned, on the first solo lap that we did. Now to gear 1, you can see we're braking quite hard for longer. If you compare this to the previous lap that we did, the previous lap we broke a little bit lighter as we went into the braking zone, so we trailed less, but we trailed for longer into the corner, and that kind of meant we missed the apex and didn't really get the best exit. Whereas this time, you can see we brake a lot harder for a lot longer, and then we trail off the brake really quickly, and we're almost coasting pretty much mid-corner. Which means on the previous lap, our minimum speed was around 67 kph, whereas you can see here, our slowest speed into this corner is 71. So, you know, 4k up minimum speed, we're able to hit more of that curb, and then we did on the prior lap. And you can see we're not hooked on the green, but we're as close as you could probably get. So we are taking quite a lot of that curb, and it does really help to rotate the car. And you see super early on the throttle, keeping the car on the white line at absolute maximum, and bring the car right over to the right hand side. And now into here where we did overslow the car quite a bit. You can see we broke a brake just after that barrier on the left goes out of view, but we did overslow compared to the previous laps. We lost quite a lot of time. You can actually see we do turn in quite early. You can just see we scrubbed a lot of speed off. You see our minimum speed here is 150, and if you go back to lap 5, our minimum speed in that corner is 154, 155. So we're a lot quicker. And then on the exit, you can see here on the exit curb, we're 178. Then we compare it to lap 6. So yeah, we're like 4 or 5k down on the apex, and then on the exit we're at the same speed. So we're probably a k or 2 down. So just in general, we could have carried a lot more speed in, and that's solely because we could have just rolled off the brake a bit sooner. But again, it's really hard to get this corner consistent because the car does feel like it moves around quite a lot, and you never really know what it's going to do, whether it's going to snap understeer and just wash wide, or if you're going to have a bit of a snap on the rear. It's just very hard to predict. So generally, it is a little bit better, or a little bit more consistent to go in a little bit too slow than too fast. But again, we gave up probably a 10th through there, so that's very important to note, at least for the next laps that we do. And now through 100R, you can see we hook a bit of that grey initially on the right hand side. Hook it again, down to gear 3, trying to keep the car kind of on the inside of these rubber lines here. You can run out a bit wider, but I find that generally it's kind of pointless because you just have to scrub off more speed to get back to the inside line. But you don't have infinite front end grip. You know, it's not like a custom setup where you can dial in as much rotation as you want, and you can kind of just coast through the corner, take a wide line, narrow line, any line you want. This car does have a lot of understeer, so if you do overshoot, you have to take a downshift, a bigger lift, or a bit of a brake to make sure that you can drag the front back round and get the car back to the inside line. You see we got the car nicely. We're able to get to the curb nice and early, get back to the throttle. You see we actually do end up quite wide, which is suboptimal. Ideally you want to kind of be a bit more narrow so you can set up the next corner a bit earlier. And as a result of that, you can see we're actually braking kind of pointing away from the corner, which means we kind of have to blind guess when we're going to turn in. We do get the turn in quite nicely, and you actually saw on the lap we do get a very good exit relative to our previous fastest. But again, we lost a lot on the entry because of how poorly we set that up, just by being a little bit impatient on the throttle through 100R. So it is kind of a butterfly effect, really, where, you know, if you go a bit wide in one corner, you're going to mess up the next corner and just lose a bit of time here and there and everywhere. You can see we do get a good exit. We let the car run out again, not too wide, which was nice. And then keeping the car as far to the right side as you can without scrubbing the front. And then into the chicane. You can see we brake just after this orange barrier on the right hand side, which you can see here, or at the tarmac road, whichever preference is kind of better for you. I find that going just after the orange barrier disappears from my field of vision. That generally is a slightly better or a slightly easier to follow brake reference into this corner. And then again, it's usually a bit early, but you can just trail off the brake and just, you know, kind of take the corner at your own pace without risk of overshooting. You can see down to gear 1. Again, similar to turn 1, braking on full pressure for quite a long time and then going basically straight from 100 to 0, because again, that trading phase really kicks into the ABS, and you'll see that in the final sector. Honestly, I didn't get it particularly perfect in some corners. You know, we tried trading in while turning, and the car just kind of understeers or washes wide with all 4 tyres. So again, we will look at that in a second. But again, you can see we did get the curb nicely, we hooked nicely, and that means we're so far to the right hand side, you can see we've got a lot of room to play with, and it means you can almost take the left flat, with, you know, even with the throttle understeer that we are getting. And you can see we hook that curb nicely. We do get a good speed through. We carry good momentum on the exit as well. Again, we did kind of overslow the chicane a little bit, so we did get a good exit, but, you know, we kind of lost a bit on the entry, gained a bit on the exit. So it is about getting a balance. There's probably a median you can find between the 2 laps where you can get the best of both worlds, but we haven't found that just yet. Or we have one more run or a couple more runs to do that. Now getting over to the white line, we brake kind of middle of the AstroTurf, so kind of mid-distance between, you know, that kind of the duration of the AstroTurf, I should say. Or you can brake kind of in line with when the Avis barrier starts to kind of curve away. You can see we're braking while turning. You can actually see we do get a good initial bite on the front end, and then we do get like a big old wash, you know, as we're trying to give the front tyres too much to do, and also kicking into that ABS, which just means the car does understeer and push quite wide. You can see that means you have to be a lot longer waiting before you get back on the throttle. We do get a good exit out of it, but you can see we completely missed the inside curb. And the curbs do help to hook you around quite a lot in this final sector. So again, just by braking a little bit earlier, perhaps, or braking a little less hard, and turning in a little less aggressively on the initial, just being a bit more smooth in general in that section would have helped us quite a lot to, you know, get on that inside curb and get a bit more hooking round. Then the left, you can see we brake just after that curb. And then wait, turn in quite late, hit the apex quite late as well, but make sure we get on the throttle before you hit that curb to make sure we hit the curb and run it as smooth as possible. It does bounce quite a lot if you don't, so just be very, very wary of that. And then final corner, similar situation to the first right hand during sector 3. You can see we are turning, but we brake as we're turning. You know, our first initial input is with steering lock on, so that means we do get quite a lot of push. You can see the car just pushes. But fortunately, we do get a good exit. We do get on the throttle nice and early, let the car run out on the exit curb. Somehow don't get an invalidation, and that is our 40.6. So again, not a perfect lap, but definitely a good banking lap. So let's have a look on Coast Save Delta really quickly, just to look at those last couple of corners in particular, and let's go for another run as well. Okay, so here we are on Coast Save Delta. We have the 40.681 that we did. Let's have a look at the data. So the main thing I wanted to look at and correlate is this corner here, this right-hander, but I also wanted to look at the final corner as well. Mainly, I just wanted to look at our braking inputs and why we had that massive understeer that we kind of encountered. You can see coming into that first corner, we're turning quite heavily before we start braking. And obviously with the ABS 6 and with the brake bias and also with the fixed setup, we do get quite a lot of understeer, and you can actually see we do kind of shoot past the apex. And while yes, the brake pressure is not that heavy, it's more so when we applied it, like you can see versus the reference lap, we actually brake later than the open setup lap. And again, the open setup will have a lot more front end grip than we have, so just need to dial it back a little bit, perhaps prioritize roll speed rather than raw entry speed. Similar sort of thing for the last corner. I think that, you know, if you look at our line, we're quite narrow, and, you know, obviously entering narrow means that you have a tighter kind of radius at the exit of the corner. And while I generally find that approach is better for me personally, and I do think it is a slightly faster approach because you can kind of square the corner off and prioritize the exit quite a bit by doing that. Again, we do hit the brake very hard initially, and you can see we're having to turn a heck of a lot and wait a heck of a lot before getting back to throttle. So I think just in general, just braking a little bit smoother perhaps would help us quite a bit, and also just trying not to push through the understeer so much in the low speed corners. But again, we'll do another run, see what sort of lap time we can achieve, and see how we would improve moving forward. Okay, what we've also done is slightly lowered the fuel ratio, so we've gone to 81 as we saw on the HUD reading. We've also gone a little bit lower on the virtual energy. We're on 38% now. Obviously we have about 3.1% a lap, and 12 laps, it should be around 37.2% of virtual energy that we need total. So again, we can always raise it a little bit if we need to, but again, around that ballpark should be totally fine. We're also running 431 TC from the very beginning, unlike on the previous run where we started on 430, went up to 431. Okay, first run on the new tyres. Let's see if we can make something work, shall we? 40.6 to beat. Definitely see a quicker lap time. But ultimately I just want to try and at least match it. There we go. That was much better. So we lost quite a bit through 100R, but look how much we gained back. We gained 600s back through there. A little early on the brakes there. Yeah, a bit too early on the brakes. Into there, unfortunately. Not the greatest there, unfortunately. Got a good exit, but definitely more time in that. There we go. Yeah, that was a much better lap, that was. Still not perfect, but yeah, that's a strong lap, it is. 0.5. Good stuff. Not quite at 5.7. Or 5.6, sorry, but... it's a shame, but 40.5. I'm really happy with that lap as a reference. So let's go through that lap, figure out what we did well, and how we can improve even further. Okay, so let's have a look at that 40.573 that we just did. I don't really see myself improving that by too much, at least in this sort of video. But I want to look through anyway and see if there's any obvious mistakes I can pick out, and anything that we can really try to find. I think it's only going to be really 100th here, a couple of hundreds there. I think definitely a 40.4 is doable though. Would be awesome to try and get that on the leaderboard, but at least from my side, it feels like that 0.5 is pretty strong. So let's get into it. So coming down towards turn 1, I did feel like I broke quite early. So perhaps it's one of those corners where you have to brake a little bit earlier than you think. Especially kind of similar to the chicane in Sector 2. It does feel like with this car, you need to brake a little bit earlier and kind of trail off quite early and kind of make sure you're coasting before you even start turning in, like, fully, you know, at the apex. So it is a bit unorthodox, definitely does feel that way. But again, I'm glad I kind of figured that out. And definitely, it is better to brake a little bit earlier, make sure you're coasting as you're kind of hitting the apex, and you get a lot more rotation at the mid-corner for that. So and see, looking at that kind of that speaker on the left again, braking as it kind of goes out of view. You can see hooking that inside curb. Actually are getting the hook round with the right wheels on the green. So that was faster. I did have that gut feeling. But yes, it was a little bit faster. Back on the throttle nice and early. Keep the car only on the white line. And then in towards turn 2. I feel like there was still time left on the table here. I feel like this was one of the corners where we didn't really optimize it. I think there's probably half a tenth in here. But again, it is pure. It feels like luck in terms of it's very, very difficult to actually get that corner right. Because if you try and carry more speed in, it's really hard to hit the curb and get the hooking that you kind of want to get. But if you brake too early, then of course you just scrub off a lot of speed, even if the line is optimal. So you can see come into here, braking just after the barrier, as I mentioned. Onto gear 3. We did miss the apex here, so we did carry really good speed through, but you can see already we were at 150, 149. So our minimum speed was really poor, because again, we had to scrub off a lot of that speed in the mid-corner. So while yes, our entry and exit were good, because we missed that curb, we had to scrub off more speed and we lost a lot in the mid-corner. So really unfortunate, because that was quite a big stain on the lap. But regardless, we do exit quite nicely still. We use a bit of the grey on the right-hand side. You can just see with our right wheels. We actually have a little bit on the grass. But again, we generally do just hook really nicely there. And then as we start to drift away, downshift, get a bit of extra engine braking. And then get back on the throttle. Use a lot of that curb on the right-hand side. And unlike the previous lap, you can see we exit within the middle of the circuit. Like on the previous lap, we were, you know, right over there. But here, we have a lot more space. We're a lot more to the right-hand side, which means we have a much better setup for the next corner. And you'll see, you know, especially on the lap that we just did with the Delta, you'll see we gained a lot of time through here. Even though we did kind of miss the apex a little bit, we didn't really hit the curb optimally, we got a really strong exit. Solely because we just had a really nice setup for this corner, and we're pointing more straight rather than pointing up completely away from the corner on the previous lap. You can see we brake midway between, so just after that curb on the left disappears, but also just after the gantry kind of disappears from our vision. Gear 2, again you can see we do miss the apex here. I think if we'd hit that curb, we would have probably gained a few hundredths as well. So a bit unideal, but again we got a really good exit. You can see we get committed to the throttle really early, full commitment, minimal TC interference as well. You can see on the replays, if you're on full throttle, whenever the throttle kind of blips a little bit, you can see kind of here, it kind of looks like it's blipping a little bit. That's when the TC is in. That's when the TC is intervening and when the TC is cutting in. So we had very minimal TC interaction there, which is good. And we didn't use the exit curb either, which is nice as well. And then keeping the car far to the right side as you can without scrubbing. And then into the chicane, which I feel like we got really nicely. You can see we brake at the exit road on the right hand side, kind of midway between, or midway across that exit road. If we go kind of into the alternate camera, you can see, well, at least from our POV, it was midway on the thing. But actually the car is kind of midway between that and the orange. So it is a bit of FOV weirdness. But again, you can see with our, to the right of our screen, that's kind of when the road flashes past. So that is when we brake. Down to gear 1, hit the inside curb. Got a nice hooking, similar to our previous PB. You can see we're really far over to the right hand side. That means we can take a slight lift and then just run through the TC, keep the throttle fully on. Luckily, we keep it just within the remits of the track limits. You can see our left wheels are half on the white line, so that does still mean we're valid, which is very nice, but just be very, very careful in the races. I'm not sure if the track limits are any different online. They should be, but, you know, just in case, just be worth bearing that in mind. And then, coming up to the next corner, you can see we brake a bit earlier than we did before. So you can see we brake kind of at that white line on the ground. You can see there, we brake just after that. Down to gear 2, we hit the inside curb, perhaps take a little bit too much. I think it is better if you take the red and white only, but again, we do get a good hooking. We get on the throttle nice and early, which means we do get a little slide, and we do keep it within track limits as well. So yeah, wasn't perfect, but was still very nice. We gained time to our previous PB. And then through this left, you see again, we brake just after that curb, down to gear 2. Not using much pressure, again, just trading in long, just trying to scrub in as much speed off as you can without kicking into the ABS. And then you hit the inside curb, and as we're about to hit the curb, you use the throttle to lift the front up. Basically put more weight on the rear by using the throttle, which means that the front can clear the curb more smoothly. And it also helps with traction as well. Use a bit of TC override on this exit curb here. And then final corner. Turning in a little bit later than we did on the previous lap. You can see we are braking just after that orange barrier goes out of our view. And then treading in nice and deep, and then getting on the throttle really, really early. You can see we hit the inside curb, get on the throttle super early, and get a really, really straight exit. That's what gained us time as well. So that last corner, taking a little bit of a wider line than we did before. So kind of almost V'ing the corner off earlier. So, you know, you saw in the previous lap we were kind of approaching the corner from this angle and then V'ing off right at the end and then hitting the back of the apex. Whereas this corner, you kind of V'd off a bit earlier, hit the apex slightly earlier, but been on the throttle slightly earlier. So basically doing everything a little bit earlier in the corner really helped our course through here. And it also meant we weren't pushing through the front tyres as much because we weren't engaged in that ABS because we just had a slightly shallower approach angle of the corner. You can also see we tried off a brake earlier and we were actually coasting earlier in the corner as well, which means we had more front end bite at the point the way we wanted it. And then keeping it absolutely pinned, and that is our lap of Fuji. So let's have a look on Coach Dave Delta, see if there's anything outlying on the inputs side that we could do differently, and then let's look on the raw hot lap. So here we are, we have the 140.573 that we did, and I want to kind of compare and contrast our comparison, mostly with this reference up that we have. We saw on the previous run that we did, in this corner and the last corner, we actually broke later on our fixed setup than we did against the reference lap. Whereas now you can actually see on both scenarios, we're either braking in line with the reference lap or earlier. In this case here, we're braking earlier. Which is really, really important to know. Again, we're braking earlier than we did on the previous lap, but again, you can crucially see that we're trailing off a lot earlier, and we're getting through the corner, taking a much narrower line, and we're not shooting wide. On the previous run, we were braking heavier here. At this point here, we were braking around where the yellow trace mark is there. But this time you can see we're using minimal brake pressure. We've basically done that initial hit, and then you let the car coast through the corner. And you can just see how much better the rotation was, how much easier the car went through the corner. We actually hit the inside curve a bit too much, whereas in the previous lap, we were overshooting. So again, just braking that a little bit earlier just allows you to spend more time coasting and spend more time scrubbing off the speed gradually, rather than trying to get it all scrubbed off in the mid-corner while you're turning it. Final corner is exactly the same. You can actually see we're closer on the racing line. If you look at the graphic just above my head, you can see our trace line is a little bit closer to the yellow than it was before, so we did take a slightly wider line. But again, you can see we're using 75% pressure, trailing off nice and quickly, and almost letting the car coast naturally through the corner before getting back on the throttle. And you can see we do have a slight hesitation at 75, about 3/4 throttle, 75% throttle, but then we do get back to full throttle quite quickly. Again, that is mostly just because of the slight twitchiness on the exit, with the low TC settings and also with the fixed setup not having the best traction in any case. But again, pretty happy with that lap overall. I think in general, just there's not really a huge amount to look at. We do seem generally quite uniform. We do take quite a late lift through here. You can see compared to the reference lap, we just take a little bit of a break. But again, you can see we exit really, really nicely. And actually, compared to the reference lap, we do take a downshift. Whereas the fixed setup or the open setup lap keeps it in fourth. So again, it is preference. I think you can take it in fourth through 100R, which is turn 3. But I generally think that shifting down a gear helps a little bit with rotation, just helps a little bit with scrubbing off speed rather than using the brake and coasting and lifting for longer. Because again, you do see that the reference lap does lift earlier than us and lifts for longer, and the minimum speed is much of a muchness. It's like 0.1 kph difference at you know, our lowest speed. So it really isn't too different. So let's have a look at that raw hot lap now. Okay, so now we're going to try and hop in one of the practice servers to do a Logitech McLaren G challenge lap in the actual car so that you guys have a Delta run on Coach Dave Delta. Ah, bad exit. Really bad exit. That's not too bad. And there you have it. That is our lap guide for Fuji in the Logitech McLaren G challenge. I hope you guys found the video helpful. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new. Make sure to leave a comment down below if you have any other questions or if you have any videos you'd like to see. Also, if you're looking to do any of the other daily races, make sure to check the video right here. We've gone over the Work Experience race, we've gone over the Energy Free Sprint Cup and the Energy Free Fixed races for this week. So make sure to check those out. Take care and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.